Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Gardner. Welcome back to the second day of class, and it's now virtual. So now I get to teach you without my shield on, but if you'd like me to put my shield on to make you feel better, I will. We're going to go through a short lesson today, and then you're going to have an assignment to do, and I'm going to show you how to do that before you begin. You should have already read the intro activity reading on the students, and we're going to be going over that in just a minute. So if you have not done that, go back out of this lesson, this virtual lesson, and read that intro activity. It's really short, so that you will understand what we're doing. So today's lesson, we're just going to go over what you read in the textbook pages 4 through 14 that is under the classwork for the last class. So that was homework that was assigned, and you should have gone through that reading and taken notes. So we're going to start working on that. And we're also going to be using that lesson for when you come in to class the next time in person. So today we're going to be talking about what is psychology really briefly. I know we covered that the first day. What are the goals of psychology? And then what is the history and approaches to explain human thought and behavior as we look at the history of psychology. So, in looking at your notes, did you write down what is psychology and what are its goals? So think about a minute. Could you explain that to me? What is psychology and what are the 4 goals? So, psychology, as we talked about the first day, is a scientific study of behavior and mental processes, and it explains why a person would act the way they do, think the way they do, and that it goes from someone's brain. It can also go to a group of people. So when we talk about like conformity, that would really apply there. And then also different cultures. Why do different cultures think and behave a certain way? And so we talked about it has extensive topics for memory, relationships, and disorders, and all of it is based on research. Okay, so what are the goals of psychology that were listed in your textbook for the reading? So first is to describe, predict, explain, and control or influence. So we're going to talk about these and what they actually mean using your intro activity that you did. So let's talk about describe first. So describe, if you look at this picture of an observational researcher, she is taking pictures of a chimpanzee, and that is something that psychologists do. They work with animals. Some work with even birds to look at behavior of animals. And she's just describing what is the chimpanzee doing, describing like what are his behaviors. Obviously, she can't see what he's thinking, but what are some of the behaviors that he's displaying? When we talk about predict, and the reason why I picked this picture is because predict is what are the different reasons why something could be happening. So you see the brain is kind of compartmentalized into all different types of factors and things like that. And that's sort of how I think about predict. Like what are the things are the reasons why a certain person would behave the way they do. Explain is, as you see this homeless teenager is, why is it that one person has thoughts and behaviors in a similar environment or from a similar family with the same heredity? Why do they act and think differently and so forth? What are some reasons to explain it? And then lastly is what a lot of psychologists do, which is control or influence. So how do they help people? So for instance, this is someone using a planner. They are going to exercise. They're watching what they eat, maybe not eating chocolate, or maybe they eat chocolate to feel better. But if there's some kind of research on that. But they definitely, you can see them trying to find ways and strategies to feel better. So that's what we're going to be looking at when we look at our example from the interactivity, and then also you're going to get a new example to use these goals of psychology. So using the interactivity of a typical student, those were students that were in college, but some, you could have sort of identify with the things that they were talking about. What are the goals of psychology? How would we do that? So if we look at that, describe what is going on with the students in the story. So take a second and think about that. What's going on with the students in the story. So if you said they're dealing with stress, so they're having some emotional responses to stress about studying for a test. So with the second one, predict what are the possible reasons for their thoughts. Well, they're responding to different events, and what happens with one person definitely would create more stress or less stress in another person's. People had different strategies about how to study. Some people were studying flashcards the wrong way, and so the teacher was trying to intervene, but there's definitely a reason why some were stressed. Some didn't study at all. Somebody studied but didn't study the right way, and creating stress. So predicting is, what are the different events that cause that stress for different people? And then why are some people responding differently? So if you take one event, which people are more likely to be affected in stress is what you're looking at. So with the students, one thought that a bracelet would make them less stressed out during the test, and maybe that was a placebo, like that they were not stressed because they thought this bracelet was helping them. And so when we look at that explain, we're trying to figure out why is one person less stressed than another. And then lastly, is control or influence? How can the teacher help the students? So in this case, the teacher is giving advice that they don't know of any research about a magnetic or metal bracelet that makes you less stressed out. And then they're going into different strategies about how to do flashcards. There is a right way to do flashcards and a wrong way to do flashcards. So they're applying coping strategies. So they're helping strategies to help people to control their reactions and so forth. Okay? So it's going to be a lot easier when we get into the Aaron case study, where you'll really be able to look at describing and predicting and explaining and trying to control and influence when we look at a more detailed case study than the one that you just looked at. So one of the other things that was in the chapter that's very important, as we pull out the most important things, is these approaches to psychology. So reasons historically that have been used to explain thought and behavior in psychology. And it's kind of evolved into the definition of psychology, which is thought and mental processes and behavior. And before, it used to just be mental processes, then it was just behavior, and now it's both. So that has evolved over time. And as we see some of the old ways of thinking about it, it's important to see the evolution of the actual study itself. So let's review some of these. Go to that section in your notes, and let's review 5 of the different major historical approaches to psychology. So the first one, psychology should study how behavior and mental processes allow organisms to adapt to their environments. Adapt is a really important word in that particular definition. So which one is that? If you said functionalism, which is James and Charles Darwin and James's students also, you would be correct. So adapting and functioning. So I think of I'm functioning in my environment. I'm trying to function no matter what happens. So I'm adapting. So those two words really go together. Okay, second one, psychology should emphasize each person's unique potential for psychological growth and self-directness. Which one would go with that? If you said humanistic, you would be right. So Carl Rogers, also we haven't talked about him, but Maslow, and we'll talk about him if we get to motivation. The humanistic side, that we all have this potential, and it's basically based on our own motivation. So this is where growth mindset would fit in, that you are guiding your own behavior and thoughts and behaviors. Okay, number 3, psychology should focus on elements of conscious experiences using methods of introspection. So this is conscious experiences. That is structuralism. That's one of the first things, not the first psychology, because that's going back to the Greeks, Aristotle, Plato, even Descartes and Socrates. But in the modern era, structuralism is under Titchener. And he really looked at conscious experiences, and we'll look at introspection and give you an example of that as we get in further next week. Number 4, human behavior is strongly influenced by unconscious sexual and aggressive conflicts within the mind. That is psychoanalytical, or Freud, and we'll get into Freud. We can talk about Freud. He blends into many different areas in psychology, personality being a major one, and child development being another. And number 5, psychology should scientifically investigate observable behaviors. That's important there. That can be measured objectively and should not study consciousness or mental processes. This is behavioralism. So behaviors, like observing behaviors. So behavioralism, that word behavior is in it. It's easy to put those two together. This is Ivan Pavlov, Watson, and Skinner. Pavlov did all of the classical conditioning with dogs and bells and things like that that you may have heard of before. So those are the major things that you need to know from the chapter. And we're going to be using those again, and you've got notes with that now, but I want to make sure that we reviewed the major things. So let's go back into goals of psychology, and then when you guys come in the next class, we're going to be doing the historical figures and so forth. So there are 2 assignments that you need to do for today when you go back out of Canvas. So you've done your intro reading, we've done our lecture for the day, and then you're going to do 2 assignments. Those 2 assignments are going to go on the same page because you can only submit one assignment for a module or whichever. So we are going to have them on the same page, and I'm just going to correct them on there. So on the top of the page, you are going to read the case study of Aaron and apply the goals of psychology to his case study. You're going to read what's going on with Aaron, and then you're going to write down your discussion questions or type them in and be ready to submit them. We're going to be discussing them when we come back in, so you may want to have a copy of that. I don't know. Maybe you'll remember what you wrote down and so forth, but we'll sort of talk about that at the very beginning of the next class. So describe. You're going to objectively describe the issues that Aaron's having. You're going to predict what situations cause the issues that he's having. So describing is like what's going on that would, in terms of his behavior. What's causing that behavior? And then why is, and it should say Aaron, I'm sorry, Aaron, why is Aaron more vulnerable to respond? Like, why is he acting that way as opposed to somebody else that may not be in that same situation? What are things that are explaining why he particularly is vulnerable in the situations? And then what can be done to help Aaron as he gets through? And again, I'm sorry, it says Billy. That was my old case study, but it's Aaron. What can be done to help Aaron as he goes through? So that's the first thing to do, is that assignment. The second thing I'd like you to do is look at Sapolsky. So Robert Sapolsky has a really interesting video that you're going to watch, and you're going to write down the answer to this question under your answer to the Aaron case and submit it to Canvas. So Sapolsky is going to talk about the complexity of psychology. Seems like kind of straightforward and so forth. And what I really like to start with during the year is looking at Sapolsky, because he has a really interesting way to explain human thought and behavior. And there's different levels or factors that he's going to explain behavior, and it really goes into those approaches and really shows you how complex even a simple act can be. So after you watch the video, and you're going to look at it, and you're going to explain how Sapolsky's explain how Sapolsky explains human thought and behavior, and talk about the levels or factors of that explanation. He's going to give you an act that happened, and he's going to explain in different levels what are the reasons why that act happened. And that will really open and broaden your mind there. Okay, we'll see you guys next time, and email me with any questions, and I'll get back to you as soon as I'm available. Bye.